There's a detail in Genesis that I've read probably 100 times, and for years I moved right past it without really seeing it. It's not hidden. It's sitting there in plain sight in chapter 5, one of those long genealogy sections that most of us have skimmed. But one day I didn't skim, and once I actually stopped on those numbers, something shifted. I've kept returning to it since. Methuselah lived 969 years. And the strange part isn't even the huge number itself. It's how specific it is. Not 1,000, not 900, 969. If someone wanted to convey a symbolic idea of great age, of nearness to God, of primordial dignity, wouldn't you expect a round number? Why 969? Why 912 for Seth? Why 930 for Adam? Those are not the kind of numbers you'd casually invent. They're oddly specific. They read the way real records read, not the way myths usually read. And when I stopped skimming and actually sat with the pattern, the way the numbers fall after the flood, generation by generation, in this steady, almost mathematical decline, I found myself thinking something I didn't expect. This doesn't look like a story someone simply made up. It looks like something recorded. That's the question I've been sitting with, quietly, without fully resolving it. What if these records are pointing at something real? Not in the simple way we might assume, but something deeper about who we once were as human beings. We're going to sit with this carefully today. I don't have all the answers. I'm not even sure we'll end with clean ones, but I think it's worth the time. Before we go further into Genesis, I want to take you somewhere else entirely, because the Genesis account becomes far more interesting once you realize it isn't standing alone. In 1922, archaeologist Herbert Weld-Blundell donated a small clay prism to the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford. It was excavated from modern-day Iraq, from what was once ancient Mesopotamia. The prism is about 8 inches tall, covered on all 4 sides in dense cuneiform script. It's approximately 4,000 years old. It's called the Weld-Blundell Prism, and it contains one of the most complete copies of a document known as the Sumerian King List. This is what kept pulling me back. It's not a religious myth or a poem. It's an administrative record, the kind of dry, bureaucratic thing ancient officials kept. And somehow, that makes the numbers harder to dismiss. The Sumerians were extraordinary record keepers. They tracked grain, livestock, land, and royal history with precision. The King List appears in multiple copies across different sites, suggesting it was considered authoritative, not sacred literature, but state record. It begins with a declaration. After kingship descended from heaven, it was in Eridu. Then it begins naming kings. The first king is Alulim. His recorded reign, 28,800 years. His successor, Alalongar, 36,000 years. The list continues with 8 kings across 5 cities. The total for this pre-flood period, 241,200 years. Now, to be precise, these numbers are not defensible as literal history in the modern sense. Mainstream scholarship reads them as symbolic, shaped by a base 60 numerical system and likely carrying cosmological or ceremonial meaning. They appear designed to elevate early rulers into a semi-divine category. That explanation is reasonable. I've sat with it. I don't think it's wrong exactly. But what stands out is that the text itself makes no distinction in tone. The same dry, administrative language is used for both early and later kings. No asterisks, no signal that the numbers should be read differently. And then, the flood appears in the record. Simply stated, the flood swept over, and everything changes. After that, the numbers don't just drop, they begin a long, steady compression. It feels almost mathematical. When I first noticed how closely this matched Genesis, I had to step away from it for a while. It was more unsettling than I expected. Early post-flood kings still have long reigns by modern standards, hundreds of years, but the trend is clear. As the list continues, the numbers shrank steadily, eventually aligning with normal human lifespans. It starts to look like a pattern, and I want to be careful here because pattern can mean a lot of things. But this one is hard to wave away. Extraordinary longevity before a catastrophe, a sharp decline after, a gradual compression toward the lifespan we recognize today. That pattern is the point. It's there in one of the oldest administrative records we have. Now go back to Genesis 5. Read it the way you'd read a record like the Sumerian king list, as a document first. The Hebrew term used here is toldadot. It carries the sense of an unfolding history, something that comes from something else, often used in Genesis for structured accounts rather than mythic narration. The numbers are familiar: Adam 930, Seth 912, Enosh 905, Jared 962, Enoch 365, the exception, Methuselah 969, Noah 950. Average lifespan, roughly 912 years. Then the flood. After Genesis 8, the numbers begin to fall. Shem 600, Peleg 239, Abraham 175, Moses 120. And there it is again, the same basic shape. Long lifespans, a flood boundary, then the numbers falling. One detail in Genesis 5 is easy to miss, but important if you actually sit with the chronology. Methuselah overlaps with Adam for 243 years. Lamech overlaps with Adam for the final 56 years of his life. If these numbers reflect anything close to historical memory, then early human history wasn't distant at all. It was overlapping, continuous, almost directly transmissible across lifetimes. That changes how the text feels. Not as distant mythology passed through dozens of layers, but as something closer to living memory. I'm not saying that proves anything. I'm saying it changes how you read it. From here, the pattern starts showing up in other ancient traditions. And this is the part I genuinely don't know what to do with. India's yugas describe a first age of extraordinary human longevity that degrades across successive cycles until we reach the present era, where lifespans are short. Egypt's Zep Tepi traditions record a primordial time of divine rulers who lived for thousands of years before history became what we recognize. Greece's Ages of Man, in Hesiod, open with a golden age where humans barely aged at all, and end with his own Iron Age: toil, brevity, decline. Different civilizations, different languages, different sides of the planet. And I'm honestly not sure what to make of that. I don't have a clean explanation for the convergence. What I do know is that I grow cautious when anyone sounds too certain about it, in either direction. There are also scientific models that try to approach this from another direction, not to confirm the ancient texts, but to explain aging itself. One is genetic entropy, proposed by Dr. John Sanford, a Cornell University geneticist, which argues that accumulated mutations gradually degrade the human genome over time. Another is the idea of a pre-flood atmospheric canopy that could have reduced radiation exposure and slowed biological aging before collapsing during a global flood event. Neither of these is mainstream consensus. They are proposed models, not established fact. More recently, biology itself has started to show something interesting. In 2006, Shinya Yamanaka discovered that a small set of proteins can reset adult cells to a more embryonic state, effectively reversing aspects of cellular aging. This earned him the Nobel Prize in 2012. Other research into senescent cells has shown that removing them can improve tissue function and extend healthy lifespan in animals. None of this comes from ancient texts. It comes from modern laboratories asking a simple question: why do we age at all? That's where things begin to converge in a way that's hard to ignore. Ancient records describing extreme longevity, and modern science discovering that aging itself may be far more flexible than we once assumed. I don't have a final conclusion for that. Let me say where I land, as honestly as I can. I don't think the Sumerian numbers are literal reign lengths in the modern sense, but the Genesis numbers feel different, structured, specific, and internally consistent in a way that resists easy dismissal. At the same time, I don't think it's responsible to flatten them into pure allegory without seriously engaging what they are actually saying. There's a verse in Genesis 6 that now feels heavier than it used to. My spirit shall not abide in man forever. His days shall be 120 years. For a long time, I read that as general. Now I wonder if it marks a transition point, a boundary between two conditions of human life. If that's true, then these ancient records aren't just stories. They're fragments of memory pointing toward a shift we no longer directly recognize. And modern research into aging may not be connected to them, but it may be moving toward the same underlying question. The hardest question, the one I haven't fully dealt with yet, is why this change would have happened at all. Genesis links it to judgment. Other traditions frame it as decline. Science treats it as biology. I want to follow that thread next, because it connects directly to how later biblical texts interpret the body, mortality, and restoration. This is where I'll stop for now. And I want to ask you something simply. When you read Genesis 5, do you actually stop on those numbers? Or do you move past them the way most of us usually do? And if you do stop, what do they feel like to you?